Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Spirit Rescue Talk. I was kind of digging the music for a minute there. I was all rocking with it. I can't help myself. It's such a good song. But I just want to welcome you guys to Spirit Rescue Talk again this week. We've got a really great subject to talk about. And we have a little bit extra planned for this particular episode today, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But today we want to talk about the transformation of the ego, or what people would call ego death, which I'm not a fan of that term, but it does get brought up a lot. But what is the ego? You know, what creates change in the ego? And is the ego good? Is it bad? Is it neutral? Kind of a little bit of information, because I think the word ego gets thrown around a lot out there, and there's so many definitions and terms and perspectives of the word ego. So let's just dig right in and kind of see what we think, and a little extra message coming in from Spirit today. But before we do that, I'm going to pass it over to Jordan, who actually did a little bit of research on what the ego actually is. And let's hear from her and see what she has to say. Jordan?
Thank you. So in doing some research, what we found out, the ego is often described as the part of you that identifies with the self, as separate from others and the world around you. It's a collection of beliefs, roles, and labels that you use to define who you think you are, such as your name, your job, achievements, personality traits, even stories that you tell about yourself, about your past. It's almost to a degree of that false sense of self or that sense of illusion, according to ChatGPT, because we all know that everyone's using it nowadays.
Yeah, I wasn't a lot there.
No. I mean, we could talk a little bit about the role of the ego. Creates a sense of individuality, helps you survive in the physical world by setting boundaries, making decisions, gives you structure of identity. I'm this kind of person. I'm successful because of these reasons. Or maybe I don't feel like I'm a good person because of these reasons. So some of that shame and doubt might come up with that. Clings to labels, roles, almost puts you in a box a little bit. Helps you define your sense of worth, sense of self. Seeks validation and control, fear of being a less than or feeling unworthy. That kind of vibe. Fears a lot of change and resists growth because it thrives on comfort and predictability. Safety and security.
There's a lot of negative stuff there. Kind of makes you want to distance yourself from an ego, which isn't good either. Mm-hmm. So I can understand why a lot of people are talking about, oh, we need to have an ego death, because they're assuming that it's somehow an entrapment in an identity that controls them and tells them what to do, like a robot. This is my program, type of thing. Yeah. You know, so I can understand why people have negative perspectives just from that definition. You know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I know, like in my own life, when I talk to people about ego, people immediately, like, the back goes up because they think, you know, it's that selfishness that, like, you're only looking out for yourself. You don't really care about other people. That gets thrown around quite a bit too, I noticed, just in day-to-day interactions.
When I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking about this very thing, about how it's not always negative, that there are, because if it's built upon belief systems and lived experience in your life, then you might have developed a belief system that real friendship means that you drop everything for those that you love, even if you've got stuff on the go, like you put your stuff aside and then you go and assist with them. And, as you're kind of working through that, if you are going through like an ego release and you're challenging those belief systems and stuff, you might be asked, I'm like, well, why would we need to let go of things that we perceive as good? But because our perception of what's good might be extreme, because of our lived experience. We might do it in excess, this good quality, right? And maybe to our own detriment at times. And maybe the direction and where you're going, you can't take those attributes with you for a particular reason. You just don't have all the answers yet. So it can be a really conflicting experience to go through transformation of belief systems when they've been with you for so long.
Well, I agree with all of that. And it's hard because when people throw out that term, you're so egotistical. You know,
Mm,
it's a bad word. It's not a 4-letter word or anything, but it's a bad word. And it's like, how dare they say that about me? And, you know, people are getting so worked up thinking, I can't think about myself. I can't do something for myself. How dare I actually love myself? Because that would be egotistical. And we don't want to be called that, do we? I think there's too much shame from society when people start looking and processing and paying attention to their self. And I think people need to pay attention to themselves. People need to go within and reflect. And I think what I view the ego is, and I know I get into a lot of scientific terms, it's just who I am as a person, but the way that I view the ego is that it is, I'm trying to say this so that people understand it. It is a program. Just follow with me for a second. It is a program in which the soul takes on to say, these are my likes, these are my dislikes, these are my passions, these are my joys, these are my wounds. It's like you're piecing together. You go into the grocery store and you're picking things up off the shelf and said, I want a little bit of this, I want a little bit of that. I'm going to throw everything in my basket. And then I'm going to check out. Well, the basket is the ego. And you're pushing it around the store going, look at what I got. Look at what I got. And it looks great and everything. And then you're focusing on all this stuff. But then somebody in the next aisle look over at you and says, they're paying so much attention to stuff in their cart. How could they? They're not paying attention to what's going on around the store. And you're like, but this is the stuff in my cart. So you've been told you're a bad person if you're looking at the stuff in your cart, which is your body, which is your third dimensional self. And I apologize for my computer because the spirits are starting to step in. But when people concentrate so much on their stuff, it's to the extreme sometimes of what people would notice and say, this is who I am, this is what I like. And they talk about themselves a lot, and they're hyped up about what they do and their likes and their dislikes, and they're constantly talking about it. And what people don't realize is when they're talking about it, what they're doing is they're processing. But these are people that process verbally or outwardly so that people can reflect with them and maybe give them a difference of opinion or share in their experience of going, look what's in my cart. I like all this stuff in my cart. And then you got another person the next aisle over going, I don't have much in my cart, and I am one with the universe. And that is great too. Yeah, I'm going to throw a lot of funny things out there. But I think that's great too, because if you decide you don't want to concentrate on all the stuff in the spirit stepping with my stuff, and you want to just think about being one with the universe and not focusing so much on your cart, that's fine. But just recognize you need the cart and all the stuff in it to anchor you into the third dimensional experience, because we are, and spirit is really stepping in with me, not yet. We are spiritual beings that need to live in a third dimensional experience. It's a denseness. The only way to anchor our high vibrational spiritual form into a denseness is to put ourselves in a cart and throw a whole bunch of stuff on top of us saying this is who we are and this is what we're going to identify with when we're in the physical world. Because as spiritual beings, we are everything. And we can't necessarily be everything when we're living in the 3D. It's too much. It's too expansive. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to pick a lot of great qualities. We're going to pick this stuff off the shelf and say, this is who I want to be. This is what I want to focus on. And this is what I want to master and learn while I'm there. And so you chop in, you check out, and you say, look at me, this is my cart. And then you come to the 3D, and then people tell you that you're bad for concentrating on the cart. Welcome to the earth where you will be judged for everything that you do. So I don't want people thinking that the ego is bad. The ego isn't bad. But I want people to recognize that everything in this universe should be balanced. We live in a world of polarity, the light and the dark, the good, the bad, the negative, the positive. And if you put everything into balance, which is somewhere in the middle, you'll find that the universe loves that. It craves balance. Just like you're on a teeter-totter. You're going up or you're going down, but if you're sitting right in the middle, everything just seems very stable. And that's what the universe is looking for, stability. So when we're concentrating on the ego, we're going to say we're going to love ourselves enough to be proud of who we are. We love our wounds. We love our gifts. We love everything we're doing. But we're not going to focus so much on ourselves all the time. We're going to focus on others as well. For half the time, concentrate on giving, loving, experiencing things with other people. And then when we need to, go back and reflect and concentrate on ourselves. And I think it's a give and take, just like anything else in the world. So that's my take on ego in a nutshell.
Yeah. And you might not love your wounds.
I love my
Wounding.
wounds.
And you know what? Sometimes you get to the point after transformation of having a level of appreciation for the suffering that you've been through because of where it leads you. And I know from firsthand experience, and when I worked in the field of addiction, you know, you talk to people who worked really, really hard at transformation of their own wounding. And, you know, I would hear more than I would not, like overwhelmingly more. Like I would say 90% of the time, someone would say, if I had to go through the suffering all over again, I would, if it gets me here.
Wow.
And so the resiliency of the human spirit is phenomenal, but it does it in concert with the ego, not in the absence of it.
Not in the absence of it. You need that, you need the strength of the ego to get you through those challenges. Because they're the stuff you put in your cart. They're the good things. They're skill sets. They're tools. The wounds come with the tools to get through the wounds.
Yeah.
And they're in the ego. And so it's okay. But, you know, a lot of people talk and throw the term out, ego death. What do you guys think that is exactly, ego death? Jordan, what do you think?
I think if I were to, you know, just throw it out there, my perspective on it, I think an ego death, for at least in my own experience, has been shedding some of the layers of who I thought I was versus who I was not. But during those processes of rediscovering who you are and also starting to separate what serves you versus what doesn't serve you, I like what you said about with the wounds come the tools. Because a lot of those tools you needed in that moment, but as you're kind of going throughout your journey of healing or wherever, as Cynthia mentioned, like the next step you go, some of those tools don't land the same way. You don't need them the same way. You've built up new tools. And so it's almost like a little bit of a shedding of the layers of what you thought you needed, who you thought you were, and kind of rediscovering a sense of self. But I definitely see it more as of a transformation. I don't see it as a death by any means, because even though throughout my own journey of continuing to do that, and I don't think I'll ever stop, to be honest with you, but I still feel like myself. I just feel more like myself than what I did before, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What do you think about the ego death, Cynthia?
I don't want to really speak for what everybody else's perspective of what they think. Like, I think it's very varied from person to person, but I can speak about myself and my own experience and what that was like through my lens. And so for me, it felt like I was shifting perspective on an old pattern. And depending on what the pattern was would depend on how easy or how much I would let go of it or how much I would hold on to it. Because if I believed that it was a trait that was beneficial to me, it was a lot harder to let it go. And there can be a lot of really intense emotion that accompanies the journey. And I think that it kind of there's a fear as well as losing your sense of self and like not knowing fully what's on the other side. And you're kind of in this place where you're like, okay. And then I would gradually get more information that would allow me in bits and pieces to like a continual shift in perspective. And eventually I was able to release it. When I got to the other side, I always felt okay, actually. But the process, the journey to get to the other side can feel very, very scary, which is where I think the death of self kind of comes in. But I always, when I got to the other side, because I've gone through this process multiple times over years, that I would be okay. And I would notice that my perspective on the same issues as I lived life would be different than what it was before. And there was more peace in my approach to life. I felt less conflict with things that were out of my control. That's just one example. So that's what it was. That was in general what it was kind of like for me.
The way that I've always perceived ego death, and what I've heard from others, because again, when I heard it, I immediately was like, the ego can't die, but the ego can transform. And just like, you go to the grocery store and you're grabbing all that stuff off the shelving, are you going to keep it forever, or are you going to consume some of it, use it for energy, use it for your life, and then go back to the store and grab some more? So when you're doing that, you're in a state of change and transition, is what people call the in-between. Believe it or not, we have many states of in-between when we're living here in the physical world. And it's a state from knowing who you were to who you are becoming in that in-between state of change.
Yeah.
And in that in-between state of change, people think that they're releasing their ego purposefully. And if they force it, it's going to be a little difficult, because you can't force something out before it's done serving you, because everything, good and bad, serves you one way or another. If you try to force it out, you'll find that you're going to have a lot of fear around that, panic, loss of self and identity. And, and many people get in crisis mode and they start pulling for anything, saying, tell me who I am. I just need something right now. And that's when you know that you're releasing too much of the ego too fast. But there are many states of transition where you're letting things go that don't serve you anymore. You've outgrown them. It isn't who you are anymore. And I think as human beings on this planet, we are so focused on our patterns and familiarity and getting comfortable with the familiar, that we sometimes even become afraid of letting things go even beyond their due date of when they're no longer serving us. We'll still hold on to it going, this is me, this is me. But then you'll recognize it's not you anymore when it's not doing anything for you. And you're like, but that's who I used to be, or that's not who I am anymore. And when you start kind of piecing it together and saying, I think I've changed. I think I'm a different person. I'm on the other side of this now. You'll start collecting new things that you'll put in your basket to say, this is who I am now. But it can be confusing. It can be challenging, and it can be scary, because we're trying so hard to be the best versions of ourselves. We don't want to get it wrong. And I don't think we can get it wrong. We may do things that we find are embarrassing, or we regret, or we've done things in our past that we've learned from, and that was part of our identity and ego. But part of the human experience is learning through the ego. The ego is a tool that we learn experiences and challenge ourselves through. So ego is actually really important in this experience. But that in-between state, that's, I think, when we have that missing part of us, that anchoring. And so we might get a little unsure of things. We might get a little fearful. We might start looking at others for ideas of who are we? Who am I going to be? This is what I do. Who am I going to become? What kind of job should I get? What kind of car should I drive? Who might be my next lover? You're looking at all of these things to pull into your life to tell you who you are, because you're in that state of change and transition. So I always say, let go of everything. Just be you in whatever state that is at that moment. Reflect on what your passions are, your desires, what makes you happy, and then allow the universe to bring more tools and more things in your basket to just reflect on what you are attracting to yourself. Because I told people, just like I had a meeting last night, I said, you are what you attract. The universe knows who you are before you do, quite often. So just let go and let things flow. So that's my opinion on ego and ego death. I think people let go too much too soon on that. So have you seen anybody, Jordan, kind of go through an ego death? And do you know any experiences that I've had, or have you gone through ego death?
Oh, many, many, many a times. And I just want to circle back because it has to do with this, of going through the ego death experience, similar to Cynthia, over and over and over again. And I think possibly that is because, we don't want to shed too much too quickly. So you shed a little bit, you stabilize a little bit, and then you go back in again. You stabilize a little bit, you go back in again. And it's a continuous process. But I really like what you said about being okay with who you are right now. Because I'm not going to lie, I struggled at a certain point. At one point, I was like, this is great. Yeah, let go of everything that's not serving me if I don't need it. I've grown. I've healed so much more. This is lovely. This is amazing. I feel so much better. Things don't trigger me the same way. Things aren't upsetting me the same way. My perspectives are so much healthier. I have less shame on myself. This is lovely. I was all in. And then I got to a point where I was like, oh man, I don't feel like myself anymore. I don't know who I am anymore. And then I started getting mad at spirit because I was like, who am I? I started getting mad at my guides because I was like, what are you guys putting me through? I feel like I don't even know who I am anymore. I got nothing here. This is craziness.
You your guides on something that you did?
I was mad at my guides. I was like, what is this experience? Y'all want me to do this because for what? And I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore. How do I know my own desires anymore? Because I don't feel like myself. And it was exactly what you said of being okay with who you are in the moment. I had to start doing that to give myself some grace because there were some parts of me that were super excited for the journey, but there were other parts of me that held on to, this is the only version of me that I've ever known. Who am I without this? What does that look like? How do I operate in the world? Who am I? I had safety in this. I knew how to operate and how I was over here. And now I'm going to go over there. And as Cynthia said, I don't know what's happening on the other side. And some of those shifts and those transformations were really hard to let go of. And when I've worked with clients in my counseling work or in spirit work too, that's a kind of a consistent pattern I've noticed of people reach a point, depending on where they're at in their journey, where they're like, I don't know who I am anymore. And there's a lot of shame that comes with that, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of anger towards the self, a lot of sadness, a lot of grieving because you feel like you're leaving a part of yourself behind.
Yep.
So there's like this push and pull of like, I like this version of me, but also as you go through the experience, you learn to have more compassion for the parts of you that you're letting go of, that maybe you did have a lot of, maybe parts of you that you may have rejected or you may have felt a way about. So it's this really weird push and pull, but I found exactly what you said about just being okay with who you are at the time gave me a sense of grace to be kind of messy in that experience, but also to be secure in wherever you're at right now is okay. Tomorrow's a new day, but you can't. I'll never forget this. My guide said, well, you can never leave behind some of the experiences that you had. And they gave me the example of a tapestry. And they said, regardless of where you're at in your tapestry, you can't just erase who you were, those experiences. You're going to bring skills, you're going to bring knowledge, you're going to bring awareness with you. Those things don't go away. But at points, I'm not going to lie, I felt like I didn't know myself. And I was fearful that I was going to leave some of the qualities and the characteristics I really liked. And that's just something I notice in patterns when working with people as well, is people reach a point where they're like, I don't know. So giving yourself the grace to be okay with who you are in the moment has probably been my lifeline at certain points when I really, really didn't know who I was or where I was going. And there's a lot of fear with that, for sure. I don't know if your guys' experience was similar, but I'd be curious to hear.
Well, I think for sure, like, my experience has been similar. And, I too have had a lot of upset sometimes with spirit and my team, because my limited perspective about myself, when they have a greater view, I'm trying to rationalize and talk to them and figure things out from my limited perspective. So sometimes it's very, very frustrating. And I want to say this, and again, I'm going to talk about working in addiction, because you deal with a lot of people that grow up in toxic households where it wasn't okay to be mad at your parents, or else there were consequences you would get if you showed anger. It was okay for them to be angry, but it was not okay for you to be angry. And I think if you have a healthy spiritual team, it would be, I would say, my opinion would be, it is okay to be angry with your team, because you're having a human experience and you are limited in what you understand and those relationships you have with them. And if they're a healthy, supportive team, their shoulders should be broad enough for the job of you getting upset when you're going through really painful suffering. So I don't think that's talked about enough in the spiritual community. And I understand that's only from my limited perspective, but I don't want people to feel like ashamed for being upset on a spiritual journey, because it's a spiritual journey. Mm-hmm. You're a human being and you're allowed to have your range of emotions.
Now, I have a question for the two of you, because something came to mind. I think Spirit probably gave it to me. And then I opened up my eyes like, oh, this is kind of an interesting question. Now, what they were downloading when you were saying something, not yet. They want to really talk. But what they said was, think about the ego connected to time and space. And they said, when you're anchored in the 3D and you're connected to society, there's the illusion of needing to know who you are so that you can keep up with the pace of the third dimension, because you need to know who you are, where you're going, what you want in order to keep going, because there's like a time schedule. Like, you don't want to fall behind. You got to keep up with society. So if everyone's going real fast, and then you're in that in between, you're somehow feeling like you're falling behind. You're not catching up, because it's connected to time. It's connected to the space of the third dimension. And then they said, picture yourself sitting in the middle of a beautiful forest. And that time just goes by. You don't worry about the time. The space is just the beautiful forest and the magic of the earth's energy around you. And you're just sitting there and you're reflecting, and you're just allowing the sun to hit your face and the wind to blow through your hair, and just to feel the peace and the calm. And they said, are you going to worry so much about your ego in that moment where it's timeless, spaceless, and you're just existing in the moment? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, no, I don't think we would care so much about who we are and where we're going and what we want and what we want to accomplish, because we wouldn't care, because we're not trying to keep up. We're not trying to accomplish something in a short amount of time. We're just enjoying the moment of existence in a beautiful place. And so they were downloading that to me, and I was like, that makes sense, that the ego has to be bound to time and space in order for it to be of importance. What do you think about that?
I think that makes a lot of sense, because in my own journey, some periods of time were so emotionally and mentally difficult that the only time I had peace was in two situations. I'd either be sleeping, right? Because I'm not thinking, right? Or I'd be in meditation. And I would deliberately get myself to that place where I felt no time. Exactly what you're saying. And I was like, what is amazing about that space is that it is like complete conscious rest, but you're still aware.
Aware.
And there's no pressure for time. And it's like I remember one time it was so comforting that I didn't want to come out of it. Like I sat there for like almost an hour just in this space of present. And it was like so much relief. It was so healing in that moment that it gives you the buy-in to go back. And it was it was through this ego transformation that I actually ended up getting introduced to the benefit of this place, right? Because it was something different than the polarity, right?
Right.
So I totally agree with that. Yeah.
In that space, you have no obligation to be anything more than what you are.
Exactly. Yes.
What do you think, Jordan? I thought that was an interesting download they just gave me.
I love that. And it's funny because my team used to always say to me, we want you to stop doing and we want you to be. Yeah. And it was going through, funny enough, they were giving me that message when I was going through one of those moments where I was very much in the ego and really worrying about time and the future and what do I need and what do I still need to do and where am I in comparison to other people? Where am I in comparison to myself? I thought I'd be so much farther in certain regards and celebrating the journey and all that too. But I realized through, this is a new perspective I hadn't thought about, but I'm starting to realize actually, I think at some point during this journey, I kind of got addicted to the healing a little bit because I liked the feeling every time, again, you kind of go down in the dirt and then you kind of come back and you have that like rest of, I feel really good. Things aren't affecting me the same way. And I wanted to keep going in and I was probably one of those people that cleared too much probably, but it was, I think I kind of got a little bit stuck on that a little bit. And it was that during that point, my team kind of came in and they said, we just need you to be and stop doing. And I looked towards them and I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I have no idea because down here in the 3D, we're always looking at the next thing. You look at, my goodness, I remember being a small kid and you're going to be going to kindergarten in a few years. Like it was always like the next thing, right? You're going up to the next grade. You're going into the next phase of your life. Like it's always, you're in grade 8. Are you going to go to college or university? What are you going to do for the rest of your life? Like there's always like looking at that next step that in a way, I kind of feel like we're a little bit conditioned to not only just compare, but also to look towards that. And so I can definitely see their perspective on that because like Cynthia, the few times where I felt so much better was either when I was in meditation or when I would come out of it. And I would have moments where I'm like, oh, I'm not in my little spiral right now. And then I get roped right back into it. I didn't take that. I didn't listen very well. Not going to lie. It took some time.
I think the human experience programs us to believe that progression is necessary.
Yeah.
And if you're not progressing,
right,
then you're somehow failing. And then the fear arises due to the possibility of failing not only yourself, but the obligation to everybody else and their expectations of you, that we become egotistical. We focus so much on the ego because we're trying to find power within ourselves to be able to accomplish whatever it is we need to in order to continue to progress.
Yeah.
And so Spirit just said, we got it. So that's nice. But I was going to do a little bit of a gift today. Spirit asked before I got on to, and I'm already getting hot. As you can tell, it's already happening. Spirit was going to ask me to do a little bit of channeling because they did want to speak, and they're already starting to come in where I can not talk. Now, I don't know where this is going to go because I channel in two different ways. I channel by hearing what Spirit says and then relaying that information to all of you, saying this is what Spirit is saying. They sometimes will just step in and just start speaking. It'll be my voice, it'll be everything, but it will be of profound knowledge, obviously not coming from me. Gotta wait and see what they want to do. I'm such a knucklehead, I know. So I'm just gonna allow Spirit in for a moment. I will. Oh, this is a tickle. When I'll let you guys know when they're here. They're here, obviously. Okay. So I'm just gonna see what they have to say first. It starts with me telling you what they're telling me, but then it kind of morphs into something else. So we'll just wait and see how that happens. So they're saying that Spirit, they won't, because I know we had asked a question before we got started, and they wanted to answer that question first. Does the ego stay with Spirit when we leave the physical experience? And they want to go into a little bit more detail because Cynthia had asked the question, doesn't the soul have ego still? Because the souls have identities, we have wounding, and we bring that into the next life with us. And Spirit says that's not exactly what happens. But so let's just see. Okay, so the world is a construct, a program in which each soul is programmed with its own personal identity, kind of like an anchor. And if they're showing me a line, like a ray of light, they're showing me that's coming down from the matrix. Stay with me here. The matrix, and then there's the earth and the universe and all the planets and everything that's assigned to our reality. I didn't know planets were assigned to us. Okay, so they're saying everything that's assigned to us. And then there's like a light beam that shoots down from this program that actually comes into each soul and is actually downloading programs of information that tells the soul who it is, what it's here for, everything. We think we're creating it ourselves, but what it is, it's actually our higher self that's literally pulling programs, inserting programs, deciding what we want to be and what we don't want to be. And it is deciding like we are an avatar of the higher oversoul of ourselves, and it's really programming and saying, I want us to do this right here, I want us to do that over here, I want us to not like this over here. So it's essentially they're playing a game, and that beam of light is coming down into the soul and telling it who it is. It's the anchor, because it's anchoring down into the earth, attaching the soul into the 3D. They're also saying that this is a collective ego as well. The collective has its own identity, and think of all these beams of light like little star clusters coming down and being programmed into the matrix of the earth, and each one is being programmed, and they're saying every territory or area of the planet has its own program, depending on culture, religion, fascination, whatever this is, desires, belief systems, they're all being programmed differently. So they're all intricately connected, but all separate. And then each identity has its own program that's coming from the oversoul as well. They're now showing, that's very interesting. They're now showing me a rainbow matrix that's actually in the earth, and there's this beautiful stream of rainbow light that is swirling inside the core or the vibrational third dimension. And this rainbow light is like spinning in a circle, and it's capturing all these light beams, these lights that are coming through the soul, and it's programming the earth, but then the earth is then pushing energy up, and those outside the matrix are literally learning from the energy that's coming from the earth through these beams of light that are coming from us. So the other side just sees sparkles of light from the other side. So we're a sparkle of light. That's an identity. And then there's a beautiful swirl of rainbow energy in the core of the earth. They say it goes down denser than that, but they said you don't want to go down denser than that because that pulls into the negative ego. Whereas that rainbow light is more what keeps us in balance of universal energy and all the rays of light of creation in that rainbow light. And I'm asking them how can they give us a definition of what their form of ego is. And they just said the ego is nothing more than a construct of the mind embedded in the soul, the human soul, of a person that is experiencing the third dimension. It is what gives you meaning and purpose in the life so that you continue the journey, so that you forget in the spiritual experience and do not long to come home. The ego keeps you anchored here, focused on that progress, so that it is a strong distraction. Because if you were to understand what the spiritual experience was, you would not want to be here. Quote unquote. So it is essential for the humans to actually be embedded in the ego to keep them focused, rather they're saying distracted in this, so that they don't remember the all that is. The more they raise their vibrational frequency into spirit, they detach more from that ego because they are not in need of it any longer, becoming one with their oversoul and all that is, allowing them to understand that the ego was nothing more than a temporary placement of a purpose so that they felt useful in the physical world, because the soul needs to feel that it has purpose and that it has use. Because when we are in spirit, we are all one with each other and we understand the purpose of our existence. Whereas here in the physical world, we forget about being spirit. Therefore, we have a substitute purpose that comes in and that aligns with the ego and tells us this is who we're supposed to be while we are here. They just asked Cynthia or Jordan if you had any questions that you wanted to ask them. Cynthia?
A question. I was actually grateful that they were coming through and giving this information. I think it was really helpful. In terms, I think, of a question, I was reflecting at the time that you asked that. I was thinking about, for those of us that know that that our path is meant to be our full-time spirit work, right? I feel like sometimes we go through this process to reconnect with that, because I've always been kind of given the message that, the first part of your life was for others, is kind of how it was formed. And when you said that the ego needs a purpose, I did a lot of service work. And they said the second half of your life is going to be for yourself. And I thought, ooh, great. I'm going to do all the things coming from my perspective of ego before I went through this process that I really want to do, but none of that happened. And it was,
as they said, that's made up. That's something that people created in the physical world to give their life more direction and conditions and structure. The human mind is always looking for structure. It's like it needs to understand what the program is in order to live within it. There is no beginning half or second half. Think of somebody that passes away when they're 3 years old. There's no beginning half and second half. There just is. Purpose is to exist, but we want to give ourselves like a mission, a deeper purpose that aligns us to being in the physical world. Some people live that purpose very early on in their lives and then rest the rest of their lives, or change their purpose because you have more than one. You can have 100 purposes in one life, all depending on what the soul can get through it in the amount of time that it is here. But in order to say your life is one half and then another half is completely false, and not to create that much of a separation, and to say this is what it has to be or that's what it has to be. Life is actually not split apart in any formation, but rather time doesn't exist at all. That is also an illusion, but it's rather just your soul living the now through various frames of dimensions that seem as if we are progressing and moving forward, but really it's dimensions and realities, and the frames are moving, continually changing. And so when we're moving from different reality to reality based on the focus in which the soul aligns to, we then feel and we see the illusion of continual progress and time moving forward, but that actually doesn't happen at all. So there is no linear time of your purpose, period.
So why, my question is, I always felt of it because at the time that I got that, it was actually a reading, but the time that I got that reading, I was going through a really significant transformational time in my life. So I didn't literally look at my life 50-50. It was more like the language was, I think, just a reflection that I'm going to start going through a transitional period, and it's going to evolve a lot of challenging to old belief systems and how I was living my life. And but my question is, if the ego is so essential to being here in the third dimension, why do they have some of us go through such a deep shedding or releasing of it?
They don't have you do anything. The soul decides that it wants to do that because it is constantly looking for change and growth and enlightenment. The soul desires change. The soul desires growth. They do nothing on the other side to orchestrate any of that. Jordan, you have a question.
I do. So my question is because I'm thinking of those viewers who, like all of us, are going through this journey, and it's hard sometimes. And so my
here, and you are, and they feel very bad about that.
I'm like, it's hard sometimes. And so my question is do they have any advice for people who are really going through that transformation and are getting to that point where there's who am I versus who am I not, where you feel like you're becoming someone you don't know? Because I find people tend to like lock in a little bit around that point. And I'm just curious if they have any advice or just, a supportive perspective for people that are going through that very difficult process to help that transition go a little bit smoother. Because we know healing comes with a perspective shift sometimes.
They are so excited to answer this question. So they said that's the magical time. That's the experience where you get to actually cease. Time stops in that moment of going through that transition. And they said that's when you can rejoice in the magic of your existence the most. And when you are actually not focused on a purpose or in a process or in a skill, and you're somewhere in between, that's the cracks in between dimensions. Those are the cracks in between your focus, where you're able to silence everything into that magical moment of the oneness of who you are, connected to everything. And they said, instead of being in a place of fear, be in a place of rejoicing, go inward and love yourself entirely for who you are in that very moment. They say the more you can do this, the more you can step outside the construct of the ego and be at peace with everything. And you'll actually cease to actually desire or need anything going forward, because you'll recognize that nothing matters but just love. Sorry, they were very excited to answer that.
That's a lovely goal. And I can tell you sometimes in the human experience, we need transitional coping to get to that point.
Yes.
And telling somebody to do affirmations every day and look in the mirror and say, I'm smart, I'm beautiful, I'm great. That doesn't work for everybody. Some people need a different process to get to the same place. Like there are many paths up the mountain. So is there any other recommendations they might give? I know that's the ultimate thing. I'm not disagreeing with it, but if
well, they're saying we never said anything about affirmations. We never said anything about you trying to feel better about yourself. What they were saying is you can silence your mind and just be one with yourself for who you are in that very moment, knowing that you are the existence of God within a third dimensional body, and that nothing matters but the love of the existence of yourself. And if you're having a hard time getting to that place, then you're concentrating more on your wounding than you are on the actualization of your soul.
It's kind of what Jordan was saying then about her lifeline at times was just showing herself grace and accepting for where she's at and being okay with it. So it kind of mirrors that a little bit.
And they're saying this is the end result. This is where the souls are trying to align to. This is where they're trying to get to. And when they can get to that moment of just being at peace, releasing the past, releasing the future, and being one with everything in the existence, in the third dimension, you have reached the state of nirvana. And you have outgrown all your karma and can ascend to the transcendence of your soul. So they do not expect people here in the physical world to master this before it is due and before you are ready. So don't try to force it. Just let it be.
I was just thinking that because I also imagine, as Cynthia was saying, like, and I do agree with them in the sense of like, that is a beautiful place to get to. But I'm also thinking of folks who are having some really challenging life struggles. Like maybe someone's losing their home. Maybe they just had a passing. Like there's things happening in someone's life that might impede on that at points. And
they didn't say it was going to be easy.
And that's where I'm like, at least in the moments, and I'll just speak to myself in this experience, that in moments when I really struggled with that, my team gave me a lot of grace and said, we see what you're like, we see the outside influence and we're proud of you for where you're at. So there was a lot of grace I found even from the other side and from my team in supporting me through those moments, because I wasn't perfect and I wasn't doing it perfect. I may have had expectations on myself during that journey that I was not meeting up to, but they were able to see and give grace because
they're saying that they're agreeing with you, but they're saying part of the reason for the existence here in the third dimension is to go through the testing. The soul is testing itself to see, can it go through a challenge but still see the beauty in life through the challenge and not allow the challenge to change them and change their heart and still be in a positive place and still be in a place of love even through those challenges. And that's very hard for someone to do when they're so focused on the suffering that comes with the challenge. But they are explaining suffering is a choice in which the soul is allowing its state to be in so that it completely is consumed by the challenge so much that it can't think of anything but that. And we do that purposefully so that we're not only experiencing the challenge, but we're experiencing the challenge of getting through the challenge. They said it's layered and it's, if we're able to see that everything that comes to us is a state of change, everything is changing because every decision you make creates a different reality that you step into. And when the change comes and the change isn't to your liking or pleasurable, the soul goes into trauma response or into a response of displeasure. And so it now starts reaching from the mind to try to figure out how to get through that challenge. And it goes for the things that it knows, which may create more challenges within itself. And what they would like to see us do is not go to the mind, but go to the heart when you are being forced to deal with a challenge, and see what the soul tells you and how to get through it, holding and embracing love around you. Because the moment you can encase yourself in the vibration of love, the faster you can get through the challenge. If you go to the mind, it creates more chaos, encasing you and deepening you even further into the challenge without even realizing you're doing that. So they said, go into love, not into fear, and it will get through any challenge with ease. They say one more question and then they're going to go.
Is there anything that they want to leave for the audience that's going to be watching?
They really want to leave the audience with understanding that judgment is one of the hardest challenges that the soul has decided to go through. Not judgment of others, but judgment of self. The judgment of self will be all of the mental thoughts that the soul will believe upon itself that tells it that it is unworthy. And the reason the soul does that is due to karmic patterns of the collective. Because the collective have done many things within the existence and the creation of the third dimension that it grieves and finds that it is unhappy with the mistakes that we have made as a collective. Through that collective response, we're now judging everything that we do going forward. But it is only when we all decide as a collective to stop judging ourselves, realize that everything we have done up until this moment has been nothing but a lesson, a continuation of one experience to the other in order for us to grow and achieve success of wisdom through the experience. And when we're able to finally release the judgment we placed upon ourselves as a collective, the individual souls can then release it easily. So you can start by not judging others, finding peace with what everybody does. Do not place judgment upon yourself, and just understand that everything that happens to you is orchestrated by the light, by of God, and everything in which you do from that only brings more wisdom. So they are going to leave because I feel very tingly now. And I feel like I want to give everybody a hug. Oh. So with that being said, it's when the spirit world comes through, just remember they're trying to give us advice from a higher vantage point. They're able to see things beyond the heaviness, the burdens of emotion that we're experiencing here in the physical world. But try to see it outside of the heavy emotion. Try to see your experience as if you're giving someone advice, like a friend is going through the same thing. What would you want to tell them? How would you comfort them? How would you get them through it? And that's the advice that you need to give yourself when we feel we're going through these challenges as well. Because the ego chooses to be very hard on itself, because the ego is striving for perfection. And when we don't find that perfection, we go into judgment. And I think what the spirit world was saying about the collective judging itself, and they were showing me a lot of the deaths and rebirths of societies in not just this earth, but on other planets as well. We have destroyed ourselves so many times they can't even count anymore. We have made a lot of mistakes. But just like, a child makes a lot of mistakes, that's how they grow. That's how they learn. They cannot be a mature adult without making a lot of mistakes in childhood and adolescence. So I think we need to just ease up on ourselves a little bit and have a little bit more love and appreciation for all the things that we do here in the world. So that's what I have for tonight. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to follow up with or end with the ego?
I just wanted to thank the team that came through and gave a message for us, and Amy for being that conduit. I want to acknowledge that first. The other thing is that I want to say, if you're going through this type of experience, do not underestimate the power of connection with another person, because we talk about all of these strategies to cope with it and this and that, but one of the biggest things that can be helpful is being with somebody who's non-judgmental, that can support you through it. And you know what, if you only have one, that's better than none. But the other thing I would say is not to try to make one person be your everything. Be okay with having a team approach, even in the physical. There are some friends that when I'm going through these periods that come over that aren't really about, a spiritual path. And the grounding that I feel after their visit is really, really, really helpful, especially if I'm in spirit a lot or doing a lot of meditating and stuff. And then the other thing is when I'm with a really spiritual friend, they can really validate, you're not bananas. It's okay. I've been through that too. I've had those thoughts, right? So, it's a worthy investment to build a safe, supportive, non-judgmental team of people. So that's what I would want to offer to everybody.
That's great. And just remember, if someone says that you're being egotistical, just remember that's judgment. And yes. I think the ego is learning how to exist beyond that judgment.
Yeah.
If we, like I said, if Spirit said, if we can do this as a collective, then the individual souls can then follow that. But I also want to say my own personal belief is we could change the collective by our own individual responsibility to not judge others as well, because we are a part of the collective. And if we work within ourselves to not do that, then we can influence the next person and then the next person. And before we know it, we can just get 1% of this world to stop judging and placing that judgment upon other people. I think the ego can finally ease up a little bit and just learn to love the existence of whatever it is that happens in this world. So I don't know. But again, we're ending, and if you have any questions about this or anything else, you can email us at our email address, which is Cynthia?
spiritrescuetalk@gmail.com.
There you go. And we love your comments and everything that you guys have for us. Please send some to us. We love the questions. And, I've been thinking I might do some more channeling in the next episode. It's something my guy's been asking me to do more of. So send us your questions, because all Spirit could be answering it right through me. So we'll see you next time. Have a great day.